Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 18 to 19. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre. The Lord appeared to Abraham by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing in front of him. Abraham would probably not have known that 2 of the men were angels, one of them was the Lord. In the picture, you see a big oak tree. It is still called the Oak of Abraham, as it was already in the 1500s, and it is close by Hebron. The 3 men standing in front of him would have been like today if someone were knocking on your door. When Abraham saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, O Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, while I bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant. So they said, Do as you have said. You see how welcoming Abraham was, and that was the famous Near Eastern hospitality, where your reputation was connected to how well you treated your guests. Even now, we have to show hospitality, and we have to do it willingly, like knowing that some people have entertained angels unaware when they showed hospitality. And Abraham went quickly into the tent to Sarah and said, Quick, 3 seahs of fine flour, knead it, and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to a young man who prepared it quickly. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree while they ate. 1 seah, it says, is 7 quarts. A quart is around 4.5 cups, which means that 7 times 4.5, 7 quarts, and then there were 4.5 cups in each quart. That means 7 times 4.5 is 31.5 cups of flour. Curds is a type of cheese. They said to him, Where is Sarah your wife? And he said, She is in the tent. The Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Abraham would have been 99 and Sarah 89. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah, so Sarah laughed to herself, saying, After I am worn out and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? Abraham had also laughed when he had first heard the news before. Sarah's trust in the Lord needed to be encouraged. The Lord said to Abraham, Why does Sarah laugh and say, Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. He said, No, but you did laugh. The Lord wanted Sarah to confront her own sin and her own distrust, so that she would realize the seriousness of not believing what the Lord promises. Then the men set out from there, and they looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to set them on their way. So as they looked down toward Sodom, they would have seen this garden of the Lord. That's how it was described when Lot chose this part of the promised land. The Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? For I have chosen him, that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has promised him. This shows how the Lord was deciding to reveal his plan to Abraham, because after all, Abraham was the Lord's friend. It says so in 2 Chronicles 20, verse 7. Then the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave, I will go down to see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me, and if not, I will know. The Lord didn't actually have to go down to see because the Lord knows everything, but this phrase tells how the Lord patiently investigates when there is wickedness. So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. So the two angels left, but Abraham still stood before the Lord. Then Abraham drew near and said, will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fare as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? And the Lord said, if I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake. The Lord was about to show Abraham just how wicked they actually were, because Abraham would find out gradually that there was not even 10 righteous in the city. Abraham answered and said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And he said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. Again he spoke to him and said, suppose 40 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 40 I will not do it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 are found there. He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. He said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 20 I will not destroy it. Then he said, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak again but this once. Suppose 10 are found there. He answered, for the sake of 10 I will not destroy it. And the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. Abraham was speaking to the Lord in this way, not out of a spirit of haggling, but because he was compassionate for his nephew Lot. The Lord is happy when we pray to him and when we pray for others, because it says so in James 5:16. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, my lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way. They said, no, we will spend the night in the town square. But he pressed them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Lot showed the same kind of hospitality as his uncle Abraham. He also probably was so insistent about them staying over because he knew how dangerous it would be in the town square for them to stay there overnight. It says in 1 Peter 2 that Lot was greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked. For as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. But before the two guests lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them. Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. So Abraham was trying to avoid the worst case scenario, that his 2 guests would be abused, but his solution was really no solution at all. But they said, the men of Sodom, they said, stand back. And they said, this fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. You see how ungrateful they were, because 15 years before, around 15 years, the people of Sodom had been rescued by Lot's uncle, Abraham. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door down. But the men, the two angels, they reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck with blindness the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out, groping for the door. Then the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against his people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and said to his sons-in-law, who were to marry his daughters, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to his sons-in-law to be jesting. So you see how Lot had compromised his beliefs, because he had even been about to give his daughters to these wicked Sodomite men in marriage. As morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Up, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city." But he lingered. Lot was too fond of the riches, the comfort, the status that he had enjoyed in Sodom, and he didn't want to leave. So the two angels, the men, seized him and his wife and his two daughters by the hand, the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. And as they brought them out, one said, "Escape for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the hills, lest you be swept away." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords. Behold, your servant has found favor in your sight, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot escape to the hills, lest the disaster overtake me and I die. Behold, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my life will be saved." Most pictures show Sodom and Gomorrah over here, but this one has Sodom and Gomorrah on the left-hand side, and Lot wanted to escape to Zoar. The angel said to him, "Behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. Escape there quickly, for I can do nothing till you arrive there." Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun had risen on the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities, and in all the valley, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. But Lot's wife behind him looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. It says in my notes that when brimstone would come into contact with the asphalt, the bitumen pits, or the sometimes called the slime pits, then there would be a fire. It would have some reaction and there would be a fire. When it says that Lot's wife became salt, salt was a form of punishment. It says there are many passages that show that when salt was thrown over an area to condemn it, it was condemned to barrenness and desolation. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord, and he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived. So the Lord was gracious, and for the sake of Abraham, he rescued Lot.